Hi, welcome Dr. Maya Ziegler of Monarch Family Chiropractic, and welcome to our Tuesday night workshop. And this is a new workshop. I believe the topic that you signed up for were the 5 foods that put your health at risk. And as I was really diving into the information, I felt like there's enough here on seed oils and vegetable oils that we can spend tonight talking about those. So we'll save the other 4 for another workshop, but I really want to dive into what is considered ultra processed foods that have taken over our foods and vastly changed how we're consuming food in the last 40, 50 years and how it's impacting our health. So tonight we're really talking about how seed oils or vegetable oils are putting our health at risk. And I think often if you're not in the conversations that I am in, who's really are constantly looking at health information that's available and sifting through, if you're not in those circles, then you maybe haven't heard about this. So let's get started here. Okay. So seed oils or vegetable oils, they are concentrated sources of omega-6 linoleic acid. Again, that's a detail that I don't think is necessary to remember, but it's an omega-6, which has led to a severe imbalance between omega-6s to omega-3s in most people's diets. So this is corn oil, canola oil, soybean oil, rice bran oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, grapeseed oil, and cottonseed oil. And I actually have pictures of those. So the upper left is canola. That is what a canola plant looks like. The one on the right of canola is rice bran. The one to the left, bottom left, is safflower, and bottom right is cottonseed oil. And actually, cottonseed oil was one of the first vegetable oils produced, and it is the base for Crisco. But as you're looking at those plants, do they look like you can consume those off the field? I mean, I wouldn't put them in my mouth either. And you'll see today how specifically canola oil is actually manufactured. But again, if we're finding out that a lot of these seed oils and vegetable oils are making up the foods that we're eating, this is what we're eating. In addition to some other, I would say we're exposed to other things as a result of the industrial process to get oil extracted from this. So seed oils or vegetable oils, I talked about that omega-6 linoleic acid. I want you to understand that if you hear of PUFA, polyunsaturated fatty acids, there's 2 classes of that. You have the omega-3s, which general rule, omega-3 is considered an anti-inflammatory, versus an omega-6 is pro-inflammatory. So what I want you to really get out of this is if you are consuming omega-6s, it is an inflammatory process within your body. If you're consuming omega-3s, it is an anti-inflammatory process that helps. There's benefits in terms of therapeutic doses that you can consume that help with cancer, that help with lots of chronic diseases. So in 2017, the U.S. Department of Agriculture reported in U.S. Trends in Food Availability that the consumption of animal fats, which include butter, lard, and beef tallow, fell by 27% between 1970 and 2014, while the consumption of vegetable oils rose by 87%. So the foods that we were eating 100 years ago, vastly different compared to the foods we're consuming today. And historically, our ancestors have consumed about a 1-to-1 ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s. Okay, those anti-inflammatory foods and those pro-inflammatory foods. Today, it is a 25-to-1 ratio, which is significant. Okay, so some experts have talked about a real experiment that's being run on humankind with this high level of consumption of omega-6 pro-inflammatory foods, because we don't know the impacts that it has. But I just want to show you, I mean, here we've got, you know, in this bullet points, imbalance of this omega-6s to omega-3s are linked to heart disease, GI diseases, inflammatory conditions like arthritis, cancer, especially brain, breast, ovarian, prostate, colon, and lung cancer. This ophthalmologist says most chronic diseases such as heart disease, cancer, high blood pressure, stroke, diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome, Alzheimer's diseases, and macular degeneration are linked to the consumption of processed seed oils. And I can go through and share with you statistics in terms of, you know, what they're seeing, what researchers are seeing when we start consuming higher levels of seed oils. You know, in the 1900s, 12.5% of the US population died of heart-related diseases. In 2010, that figure was 32%. In 1811, 1 person in 118 died of cancer. In 2010, it's 1 in 3 died of cancer. In 80 years, the incidence of type 2 diabetes has increased 25-fold. In the 19th century, 1.2% of Americans were obese. In 2015, 39.8%. In 1930, there were no more than 50 cases of macular degeneration. In 2020, there are 196 million cases. So there's a rise in these chronic diseases, and it's really looking at how we're living our life. How has that changed? And we have to look at the dietary component. So let's go to this next one. So seed oils are categorized as an ultra processed food. And when they are an ultra processed food, it is an industrially, I mean, I'm just going to read this quote. Industrial formulations made by assembling industrially derived food substances and food additives through a sequence of extensive industrial processes. Ultra processed foods contain little or no whole foods and are often energy dense, high in salt, sugar, and fat, low in fiber, and liable to overconsumption. They are aggressively marketed with strong brands to promote consumption and are gradually displacing traditional dietary patterns based on fresh and minimally processed foods. So I don't know about you, but when I'm consuming a food, I don't necessarily want to think industrial processes had to take place in order for me to consume this food. In fact, I don't think industry and, you know, factory and really what comes to mind in terms of an industrial process has anything to do with food. As I have Greg here who worked in cheese forever. But the terms experts have used to describe vegetable oils and seed oils are deadly and toxic, and some experts are calling for having on the front of these packages a warning label to let you know you are eating an ultra processed food. So I'd like to segue this into how canola oil is made. Okay, so I think the sound, for those of you in Zoom, if you wouldn't mind somebody chatting in to let me know that you can hear the video.
Fat, 7%.
It's going. Can you guys hear it?
Yes.
It also contains more healthy omega-3 fatty acids and is high in monounsaturated fat, which lowers cholesterol. When the canola seed arrives at the processing factory, it contains foreign material, mostly plant pieces. So the first step is to clean the seed in a vibrating sieve. The seeds, smaller than the openings in the sieve's mesh, fall through to a conveyor below. The foreign material remains on top. A conveyor moves it to a storage bin where it's collected for sale as cattle feed. The seeds pass by a magnet. It removes any metal that may have fallen in during the journey from field to factory.
Sorry.
Next, the seeds enter a roller mill. They pass between two steel rollers, which crush them into thin flakes. A conveyor then feeds the flakes into a screw press. It has a large revolving screw-shaped shaft enclosed within a slotted cage. As the shaft turns, its threads squeeze the flakes with high pressure, forcing out the oil, which then drains out through the slots. 42% of canola seed is oil. This screw press extracts nearly 3/4 of that. The remainder is still trapped in the pressed flakes, now referred to as canola cake. The cake exits the other end of the press and moves on to a second extraction. This one, a 70-minute wash with a solvent. This chemical extraction process removes all but a trace of oil. The factory then grinds the cake into protein-rich meal, which it sells as animal feed. The extracted oil, stored in large tanks, now enters the refining phase. First, they wash the oil for 20 minutes with sodium hydroxide. During this wash cycle, they spin the oil at high speed so that the centrifugal force separates the natural impurities, which the factory later sells to soap manufacturers. After this cleaning process, the canola oil is visibly clearer. However, it still contains natural waxes, which make it look cloudy. So the next step is to cool the oil to 5 degrees Celsius. This thickens those waxes so they can be filtered out. The waxes don't go to waste either. The factory uses them to produce vegetable shortening. In the factory's lab, technicians recreate production on a small scale to ensure performance and quality. Meanwhile, back in the factory, after washing and filtering the oil, they bleach it to lighten the color, then use a steam injection heating process to remove the canola odor. The oil is now fully refined and ready for bottling. The equipment first turns the plastic bottles upside down and
We're going to stop that there. Okay, so I'm just going to share with you some of the words that I heard with this process. It goes through a 70-minute wash with a chemical for a chemical extraction, and then they want to refine it, so they wash the oil with sodium hydroxide, and then they bleach it. And as they go through this process, they're taking it to high heats and then low temperatures. And I don't know if you know anything about oil. I mean, has anybody bought, olive oil, avocado oil? You see on those labels when they talk about a smoke point, like don't go above these temperatures. We have these, plants that were never meant to be consumed going through an industrial process at high heats, introduced using, chemicals and bleach so that it can be consumed. And we are really consuming rancid oil. And I don't know if you know this, but we are made up of trillions and trillions of cells, and each of those cells have a phospholipid bilayer, meaning that fats are really important for our cell wall. And so if we are consuming, and the data shows that here in the US and the UK, we're consuming 50% plus of our diet is ultra processed foods. And if we are consuming foods, specifically an oil that is rancid in nature, and it is making up majority of our food day in and day out, what does our body use to replace cells? Exactly, rancid oil. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not ready to go buy a bottle of canola oil and drizzle it all over my salad at this point, right? Sometimes I think you only need to watch that video, but let's continue here. So I found this, it's like what belongs in our food, I think I talked about sugar and reading ingredients and said, I want you to just think about a slow drip poison over time. I want you to think about deadly and toxic. Look at these rebellious dietitians. What do they call it? A chemical crap storm. And the big trend is these plant-based foods. And really is fake food, like these fake lab meats and these lab-made plant-based foods and dairy alternatives, are they really healthy alternatives? Because if you look in the ingredients, I mean, if you have to take a food that looks like a piece of meat and tastes like a piece of meat, it has to go through a big process to get there. And you've got scientists working on this to make it look like something we want to eat and make it look like something we want to taste. And when you take a look at some of these ingredients, they're using a lot of vegetable oils as their ingredient to work around. It's heavily processed. So, I mean, we really have to do our homework around what we're told is healthy. And I think, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking if we're getting plant-based foods, I'm thinking, oh, it's got spinach and kale and some of these, you know, cruciferous vegetables, not canola plants, not cottonseed plants, not safflower plants, safflower plants, right? So, I mean, oh, I just had to make sure we didn't miss anything. So we really got to think about the trend that we're moving to create these lab-based foods. Is that really healthy for us? And I think you're learning that no, it's really not. But if we continue here, oops, I just want you to see, this was, you know, a table that I came across looking at ultra processed foods, and these were just breaking it down to what's ultra processed, what's processed, and then the home version. So understand that, yes, I'm talking about vegetable oils. If you look at your ingredient list, vegetable oils are in everything. Breads, cereals, salad dressings, bread, I said breads already. They're in a lot of stuff. You have to be an investigator when you're purchasing anything that has a package to see if it has a vegetable, a canola oil, a rice bran oil, sunflower oil. You've really got to do your homework here. So you can take a picture of this slide or come back to it when we post it online, but there are options out there for you in terms of making better decisions. And let me just tell you this. Are restaurants buying high-end fats to cook food in? Majority of them?
Yeah,
Oh, not the majority of them. And you think about those, you know, fries that are dropped in that oil day in and day out. I mean, how often are they bringing in new oil? You know what I mean? That oil is constantly staying at a high point temperature. It is just rancid oil from the start. So every time you go out to dinner, know that they're not cooking your steak in nice grass-fed butter. That salad dressing that's home, like, you know, they made from scratch in the kitchen is canola oil or vegetable oil. So when you choose to eat at home and you start making decisions around what you're putting into your foods, it is always going to be better. And something you can do if you're at, you know, a restaurant or you're ordering a steak, can you grill my steak or cook my steak in butter? You can always ask for that. So, but it is cheap. That's why these vegetable oils are loved, because they're super cheap and it's easy to make a lot of it. And not only that, but what did I see? Byproducts of this process go to animal feed. So guess what? Not only are we consuming it, but we're also consuming it indirectly when we consume our animals. Vegetable shortening, that was a byproduct. So anyway, I mean, all processes, they want to use their byproducts, don't they? So, okay, so there are healthy seed oils. You've got to just understand that there is, you know, the good and the bad, and you have to do your homework around choosing your oils, especially your fats. I think in August, we're going to do a workshop on the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to fats. Fats have gotten a real bad rep. And if you look at the omega-6s and what it's done to our health, how it impacts and creates inflammation in our body, Yeah, those fats should get a bad rep. But guess what? We were told in the 70s and 80s that margarine is better than butter. We were told to use canola oil and vegetable, oils. That's better than these animal byproducts. But I don't remember, as I've stated, if you look at, what was happening in the 1800s, 1900s, we didn't have these issues back then, and we weren't eating like this. So there are some healthy seed oils that you can utilize. This is not something you would cook with, but they play a role.
Quick question. You have sunflower here, but
Right.
first slide it is also.
So, right, I would have to look into, so sunflower oil used topically, I guess I would look at, and sunflower lecithin has some really great healing benefits. Honestly, I haven't done a ton of research around how those, I haven't done a ton of research on sunflower oil uses in other ways in terms of topical and where that's coming from or where it's sourced. So let's see. Do you have a slide for healthier cooking oils? Yes, I do, Julia. Yes, I do. And that's next. So great question, Paige, and good eyes there. So healthy fats. These are really great fats to use when cooking. As far as the research that I've done, grass-fed tallow is by far the best cooking fat to use. There's also coconut oil. There's some great health benefits to that. I've heard and read some experts saying they're on the fence around coconut oil. It does have some health benefits, but it has some antimicrobial effects as well. And as you know, our gut should have a nice diversity of microbes. So if you're using some fats to cook in, maybe not always choosing coconut oil, but having a blend of those. Organic butter made with grass-fed raw milk. Again, when an animal is eating its diet, if the body recognizes any toxins, it will store that in fat. So that's where, when you're talking about healthy fats, you want to first understand the source and where it's coming from, and if you can, get organic when you're able. Organic ghee is a great option. Okay, we'll go back to that. Organic ghee, which is clarified butter, where they remove the milk solids. If somebody has any challenges or issues with dairy, organic ghee is a great option. Olive oil. Now, I feel like as I was reading, there's skepticism around olive oil and using it in heat. And what I came across is, historically, standard recommendations have said, don't, avoid cooking with it. Use it only when it's cold. But when they did, they looked at the top 10 oils and really studied and put it under heat, they found that extra virgin olive oil scored best for both oxidative stability and lack of harmful compounds when heated. You just have to be really sure on where you're getting your olive oil and the sources, because fake olive oil abounds. Again, I think people are willing to spend a higher price point on, a good olive oil. But are you getting the quality olive oil? So it's really finding that source. So authentic olive oils contain healthy fatty acids and can help lower your risk of heart disease. Now, I do want to share with you the video on how olive oil is made, because it's very different. So let's go here. If you guys are okay with this. So let's watch olive oil.
And literally shakes the olives off the branches.
Sorry that that's there.
Fresh fruit is collected into a waiting hopper along with some leaves and twigs, but these can easily be removed later. A machine like this can collect as many olives in an hour as it would take the traditional farmer to collect in an entire day. When the harvest reaches the production plant, the fruit is washed to remove any dirt, leaves or twigs that were caught up in the collection process. The more stubborn twigs and branches that remain are filtered out using a grill which only allows the fruit to pass through. To get the best quality oil, the fruit should be pressed as soon as possible. Traditional methods mean there's a delay between harvesting and the grinding process. The original method also uses big millstones like these granite wheels to grind both fruit and the stones into a thick pulp. But modern production carefully controls two vital factors. First, the fruit is sent directly from the harvester to the grinders with as little delay as possible. And second, the fruit is ground more gently. Olives can lose flavor if the fruit is heated by the friction of grinding. The most sought-after olive oil is called cold pressed. If the fruit pulp goes over 27 degrees, it can no longer be called this and loses value. It's time to extract the oil. In the traditional system, the pulp is layered between hemp mats. Each quantity of pulp is followed by another mat and so on, until the alternate layers look like a stack of giant pancakes. The stack is placed in a hydraulic press, which literally squeezes the oils from the pulp. It's collected below and has the traditional cloudy golden color associated with good quality olive oil. The modern method is far less aggressive, but just as effective. Instead of crushing the pulp, it's spun in a centrifuge like this one. As it's spun around, the oil passes out through a fine mesh, leaving the pulp behind. The oil...
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. But I found that it was, quite nice to have a comparison of a very industrialized process of manufacturing an oil. Hold on, let me go back to this first slide. A very, industrialized process to manufacture oil from these beautiful plants that were not ever meant to be consumed, versus an olive, which is a fruit which was meant to be consumed and processed in a way that honors the fruit, not bringing it above a certain temperature. And they even said if you bring it above a certain temperature, it's not as valuable. We know that you introduce heat to something and that degrades and breaks down the proteins within that, within whatever it may be. And so the less we can introduce these components that could stress and change it or create a rancid product, the better off it is. And so, here's really my challenge to you. One of the things Doc and I talk about is, an anti-inflammatory, or specifically omega-3 being a big part of supplementation. But if you're consuming a high diet of seed oils and ultra-processed foods, that's never going to make an impact. You've got to really start addressing your consumption of how you're eating your food and really the vegetable and seed oils. I think let me see, I've got, if I can find it quickly, there was just a portion in one of the articles that I had that talked about when you stop, like the deaths that could be prevented when you take out the seed oil consumption. It says each 10% increase in ultra-processed food consumption was linked to a 2% increase of incidence in cancer overall and a 19% increased incidence of ovarian cancer. Each 10% increase in ultra-processed food consumption was associated with 6% increase in risk of cancer mortality overall, along with 16% increase in risk of breast cancer mortality and 30% ovarian cancer mortality. This study found that 57,000 premature deaths were due to the consumption of ultra-processed food, which amounted to 10.5% of all-cause premature deaths, 21% of premature deaths from non-communicable diseases. I can go through these stats. So if you start to choose different foods, you are lengthening your life. You are putting yourself on a trajectory of not being someone who is conflicted with these chronic diseases that we're seeing run rampant in all of these industrialized nations, ours being number one. So thank you for being here tonight. I hope that is peanut oil just as bad? Peanut oil is not considered a seed oil that I've read, but I can't answer that. I do not know. Avocado, well, avocado tends to be, I found avocado tends to be a better choice when it comes to cooking oils, but I found that olive oil was recommended over avocado oil.
Coconut oil.
So
She said that.
but I appreciate you being here, and I'm just going to end with this. Who do you know that should be here with us tonight? Nobody else is hearing this information. Everyone that I know is, again, there are many things in our foods that we consume on a daily basis that is putting us at risk for chronic disease. But I'm not hearing in a lot of my circles the devastating impacts of vegetable oil and seed oil. And Doc and I really try and cover information that we feel is pertinent to making sure you're on the right trajectory in terms of your health, because we're looking at 30 years out or 20 years out, whatever it may be. And so I guess our question is, who do you know that you could invite or bring somebody along to? Who do you know that you could share chiropractic with? Somebody who wants to be healthier. That's our ask, because we can't do it alone. We need your help to start changing and turning the ship here of a really unhealthy state. So appreciate you. Thank you for being here tonight. I look forward to hearing your takeaways when you're in the office next. And if you have questions, please